Welcome to another episode of Small Time Songwriter. My name is Angel Corsi, and I'm, of course, your small time songwriter. Today is a bonus episode with my friend Deborah Solo, which you remember the part 1 interview we had. I felt like it was a really fun interview. I felt like she was just a very fun person to talk to, and she was very excited to talk about her band and the projects and Swallow Hill and all those great things. So check out that episode if you haven't already. But I just didn't feel like I got to get to the meat, to the part where I got to know Deborah as an artist and as a writer. So that's why I'm doing this bonus episode. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to the show. So I'm with my buddy again, Deborah Solo. Thank you for doing the bonus episode. I just felt like I didn't really get to know you, the artist. You were so like beaming with kind words of your band and Chadzillas and things like that. And I think that's awesome, but I'm glad that you had a little extra time so that we can kind of really dive into you as the songwriter.
Oh, thank you so much. I had so much fun the first time. You're such an excellent interviewer. I'm so flattered to come back and happy to come back. So thank you.
Great. And you're once again at Swallow Hill, right? Where you do teaching and all that?
Yeah, that's where I am right now. I'm in one of the bigger classrooms, and so I get to they graciously let me use their nice equipment, so I may as well just do it before work.
Yeah, that's a nice perk. Okay, so one of the things that I really wanted to get to that we didn't get to last time was I had briefly tried to get an idea of what your message was as an artist, and you kind of I think I steered that in a little bit of the direction that I didn't mean to, which was like I tried to focus in so much more on the show and the message of the show and the experience of the audience. But what I was really trying to get to that I really want to know from you is, as artists, we all feel like we have this thing that we have to say, and sometimes it comes from per project, sometimes like per album or per whatever's on our mind at the time of our life. But I wonder right now at this moment, what's Deborah Solo's message when she's creating her art? Like, what is she trying to say through her art, and what does she want to for the world to know about her and her art with that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? Like, what is the message?
That's an excellent question. I feel like for our newest project, and I do like to think of albums as a sort of themed and having a message to say, and we've definitely had different messages with our 3 albums, but with this album it's definitely like a looking inward, and I think the message is like kind of putting myself on the spot with why can't I be myself, kind of asking that question. So for example, in our new single, which is out now, Warning, it's kind of setting the tone for the whole album. And it's much more produced than our album we did previously, which is Not Your Daisy. And I think Not Your Daisy is the message of Not Your Daisy was a little bit more looking outward at other things in my life or my bandmates' lives that are preventing us from living up to our full potential.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Not Your Daisy. What was the so you're saying that you were looking outward. Do you mean just like external things that were preventing you from what?
Yeah, I think it was me kind of and with the help of my bandmates sort of pointing at issues in my life that I was resentful of. Specifically, the song Not Your Daisy is basically saying like, hey, I'm not this sweet little girl for you to, basically objectify and make into either like your savior or your villain based on the fact that I'm feminine. So like, I think the album kind of has a lot of moments like that too, where it's pointing at sort of the political climate and saying, I feel like driftwood lost in the ocean. I have no power. And, looking at the people who are judging us and just saying like, basically like, how dare you judge us? So it's basically like,
I like that. Yeah. I'm always interested.
Outward.
I'm always interested in those kinds of viewpoints from artists like you, because like I have a lot of a female identifying or women identifying artists friends and they're songwriters, and they always kind of, it's something that is completely foreign to me as a fella, which is like they always express like the fan base gets very strange very fast. It's like this thing that happens where either you're like objectified as like this sexual thing where you're like the cute person or the pretty
Hmm.
person that's the hot lady with the acoustic guitar, or you
Right.
get this or you get this other part where they almost treat you like their mother or something. That's like a motherly kind of like you have to
Oh.
take care of me, kind of like you owe me this and that, and I don't know, it's just like a weird, like it seems like it's this constant battle between like, can I just do the art stuff, can I just be like your favorite artist, do I have to be like also pretty for you and also, charming or nice, or listen to you ramble about your feelings because you're a
Oh
fan of
yeah.
mine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that way? Have you ever had
Oh,
that?
certainly. I mean, and you see it too, like people, and maybe some fellas get this kind of attention as well, but
Yeah,
it's like you want to look nice for your show, but
sure.
then if you show up and someone, someone comes up and has some expectation because you're carrying an amplifier in a dress, and like they think
Yeah,
like they got to say something about that, and you're like, this
yeah,
probably isn't going to go well. Like,
yeah,
please don't make a comment. Like
yeah,
like, but I think also it's broader too, like not
yeah,
just as a musician, but just being a female in the world. I feel like, or being perceived, yeah, it's like
yeah.
people have this expectation where, like, I had a lot of guys come up to me, early in my life and be interested until I opened my mouth, and they realize, oh, you're a
Mm.
human, you're a person with
Yeah,
opinions and feelings, I'll
yeah.
get out of the
It's
way
like
now.
ill opinions, ill.
Yeah, and I love people with opinions. I
Yeah, of
think that we should
course.
all
Yeah,
say our opinions.
yeah.
So, Not Your Daisy has a lot of, and it has some nice songs too
Sure,
about,
of course.
being able to, uh, who I'm safe with and who I'm not safe with is basically Not Your Daisy.
Yeah, I love that.
And
That's a good concept because you could have just stayed in one direction, but you wanted
right,
to show the
yeah.
nuance of like, no, 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 I can be this also, but it just needs to be the person that I feel safe with.
Absolutely. I think there was space for both. And
Yeah,
in fact, the last song on the album is called Right With Me. And it's about like just hanging out with your best friend and who you feel
awesome.
so right with. And there's two songs on there and with lyrics inspired by moments with my children. And I think there is space for both things. And I think that with Not Your Daisy, we really were going for an authentic sort of acoustic, warm sound. And our audio engineer, who's also our drummer,
Hmm.
was really dedicated to making every track something that we could recreate live with just the three of us. So
Nice.
he was like, I'm not going to add this bass part
It was
unless I
like a
can play this
focus,
drum
right?
part with
Yeah,
this bass part
that's a cool
at the same
approach. Yeah,
time.
yeah,
It was very cool. So, I mean, with the exception of a couple additional audio, vocal tracks in the background of oohs and ahs that, like some
yeah,
extra
yeah. Of
layering,
course. Yeah.
we can pretty much do that album from start to finish exactly as it's recorded. So
Right.
we were
Right.
very proud of that. It's a very good example of what we can do live. I was also very excited that it has a very live sound, in that like we're not using auto tuning or digital
Hmm.
pitch correction of any
Oh,
kind
cool.
in Not Your Daisy, which we
Yeah.
did use in Real Love because that was my first studio album, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, should we do this? I think we're supposed to do this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we
Um,
realized we didn't need to.
But let's talk about the new single because the
Yeah,
new
let's
single
switch to the new
has a new
one.
message. What's the new
Yes,
message
and a
of
new
the new record?
sound.
Yeah.
Yes, so the new message is more like after all this finger pointing and finger wagging of how you did this,
Yeah.
you did that,
Yeah.
and
Society this.
there's some introspective songs on Not Your Daisy as well, for sure.
Sure.
But the new album is incredibly introspective, where it's
Hmm.
putting the pressure on the narrator of the song, me usually,
Yeah.
to say, well, what's happening in me to prevent me from just being myself in the world
Mm.
in my most authentic
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really universal like concept that my bandmates can connect to as well and speak to, because everybody grows up having this balance of being themselves and fitting in, and sometimes
Yep.
it's for self-preservation, and sometimes it's for like and sometimes like people really do lean into their weirdness, and you may see them as someone who like is like really themselves, but
Yeah.
we don't know what kind of like things they're holding that
Right.
they're too
Yeah.
scared to say out loud because they're
Yeah.
afraid they're going to be rejected. So
Right.
I really do believe that everyone kind of has, and maybe like just growing up in the 90s, like it
Yeah.
especially felt like there was only one way to be.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was walking on a tightrope where if I just do one toe out of balance, I am going to plummet to the ground. And I
Yeah,
think that,
there's a
yep.
cultural pressure part thing that happens also
Oh,
with all that
definitely,
stuff.
definitely.
And you
Especially
just,
growing up in a small town where everyone is watching your every move, or at least that's how it felt to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that's amazing.
living up to high expectations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of people do relate to that. I love that you have this process where it has kind of like you have the previous record that is focused on the external things that are in your opposition, and then you start working your way through it. It's very human. It's like something that we
I
all
think
do.
so.
First we identify all the things wrong with society, and then we start going inward and say like, oh well, there are some things that I need to work on so
I'm
that I can
responsible for this.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that I can respond correctly to the societal thing that's happening also at the same time. So Warning does have I can feel the 90s in it. I can feel that
Oh, cool.
sort of
Yeah.
like yeah, it's a very cool vibe, and it has like it's not like so throwback that it feels nostalgic or anything, but it just you can kind of feel that that generation, you can feel the generation to
Thank you. I take that as a total
yeah, you
compliment.
should. Yeah.
Yes, I think my like my bandmates are really bring more perspectives too, because my cellist is handful of years younger than me, and my drummer is handful of years older than me. So we
Oh,
can
right.
really bring a lot of
Yeah.
overlapping perspectives
That's
about,
cool. That's
yeah,
cool.
and more in common than not, honestly. I was going to say too, the production of Warning, I'm so excited about because we really just threw that idea out the window of we have to be able to perform it live,
Yeah.
and let's go ahead and produce the heck out of this just
Right.
to get the song we want to get. So I am legit like yelling in the background. I don't know if you noticed it or not.
I did. I did.
Oh, good. I
It's
think it's
good.
pretty subtle. To me, it felt really like obvious. I was like, oh no, I'm like yelling, I'm expressing my feelings, but it's just a texture in the
Yeah.
overall layering. And it was so freeing it was very freeing to just say, let's just produce this the best that it can possibly sound, and really lean into the recording of it as its
Yeah.
own art form, which of course my drummer is steering the ship on that, and
Sure.
he's the genius behind that element of it.
Yeah.
But I really trust what we're doing as a
Yeah.
group, and
I think
I'm excited about the album. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really great. I personally like my thought process on art, which is what we're doing really
Yeah.
is just to treat every record a bit like your own art exhibit. And sometimes
Absolutely.
it's not about like replication. I think sometimes we get caught up as songwriters and artists and musicians and stuff that we get sort of caught up with the technical. We want to do we get caught up in the technical with our guitar playing, with our transitions, with our live set, and with our songwriting. We get caught up in the technical that sometimes we lose track of the fact that like we're artists and we're just making art, and sometimes the album is just the art and the live experience is a different kind of art that's coming off of
Yes.
the album. And I think that we have to really embrace the freedom of knowing that when an audience goes to see you, they're there to see your humanity, not your record. So
Yes,
the record called
absolutely.
them to see you, but they're there to see you as a person. So it doesn't
Yes.
need to sound like the record. You can do whatever you want.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And in even like letting ourselves go crazy with the production has given us ideas for how we can do
yeah,
kind of weirder stuff live that we wouldn't
right.
have thought of otherwise.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So if
the
you get
one
caught
can
up in the
inform the
technical,
other, can
yeah,
inform the other, can inform the other. So it's like
exactly.
this never-ending cycle of
Yeah. So
like
so do you think
creativity.
so you think you learned that when you were approaching the new record? Do you think that maybe that was like a new lesson that you can put in your back pocket, that sort of like, oh, this is supposed to stand alone however I want it to stand alone, and I don't need to worry about what the logistics are. It's just
Oh,
about the
definitely. I
process.
I feel like, and we're still in it. We're still working on the new album. It'll probably be available for listeners later this year or very early 2024 at the latest. So
Mhm.
just to clarify that, but I actually feel like I had this idea of a song existing in different forms when I was helping coach songwriting. Because I think sometimes I have to tell students, like, your song can always exist just as it is right now in in its purest, most raw form, you can save this version. But if you want to apply it to like a more professional sound or something that's more conventional,
Yeah.
you know, that an audience will be able to track with you, it may sound like, you know, it's going to become sort of a new thing.
Yeah.
But I always say you can keep what you have. Like there's
That's great.
nothing,
Yeah.
that way we can kind of like say, it's
It
like
gives
if
you the freedom.
yeah, and I actually use that analogy of making a masterpiece like a piece of art. I'm like, it's like if you were to paint something and then you realized, oh, you know, you grew as an artist and you realized, oh, technically I could have done this shadowing better. Then instead of just painting over what you have, paint a new one that's a replica and see if you like it better. And if not, you can show this one in the show. And if you like this one, show that one in the show. Because I think people have a hard time saying like, oh, if I change this one word, you know, they get scared. So I think that kind of helps to say like it can exist as more than one thing.
Yeah, I run into that also. I actually use, oddly enough, I use a very similar metaphor about the painting, except mine is slightly tweaked because what I say is, you know, if you look at it, if you at the Smithsonian or whatever, if you look at the art that's there, when they X-ray it, they see the art from before. So you're painting over something that you have, but you always have what you had. It's always been there. It's just buried beneath whatever you decided to do. So you don't ever have to have the fear.
That would make some good lyrics, honestly. Like
yeah, maybe. But you just don't have to be afraid to add some, you know, to like Bob Ross the thing and be like, I'm gonna put some birds here. You know what I mean? The painting's always there. You're the one that created the painting. You know.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. As you approach these new songs and approach the new record, and you're thinking about the new message of allowing people to, I don't know, how would you say this? Allowing people to embrace their secrets and just like let them be who they are fully. What would you say is like? How does this I guess how does this affect your approach to your music career now moving forward, like thinking of yourself in this way, you know?
That's a good question.
Do you guys have a design that you're thinking of? Are you thinking in the sense of, you know, because I'm writing songs right now, and for me my thing right now that I'm on is this sort of idea of identity as a like a racial kind of thing, like this like Americanized, assimilated kind of American living that's not, you know, just the average white middle class person or whatever. And I think that I've noticed that it permeates like where I want to go moving forward in my career, where I'm just like, oh, I need to have these conversations because one, they fulfill me as an artist, but two, I think it's just like important for me to be somebody that is doing this while I have this on my mind. So I'm just kind of figuring out, I'm wondering where you're at on that.
And it sounds like it might affect like what audience you draw to yourself as well.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
People who are interested in this question and these ideas.
Sure.
I think that like for us right now, like I think I said on the show last time, like my whole goal is just to write the best music I can possibly write. So it's more like a test of myself, is like how deep can I go? I think, and how that affects the trajectory of like my music career probably won't change that much, because honestly, like what I've noticed is, like I could be getting ready to sing on a stage, and like I could tell myself like, oh my God, I'm about to sing about something that I used to be scared to even put into writing in a journal. Like how can I do this? Like I'll get this feeling of fear. But then of course you remember that like, well, it's not really so obvious. And there's this like buffer of being with other bandmates and people are doing their own thing. And then you realize you play the song and nobody was even listening. So everybody was ordering a beer. They're having fun. They thought the hook was nice. They like what we're doing. They don't care. They don't care what I say.
I mean, there's a lot of element to that. So I don't know if you're on Threads. I know you're not a social media person, but on Threads,
not so much. No,
I've been using Threads as more as like my soapbox to tell terrible jokes mostly. And
that's great. Now you're gonna have to lay one on me. Now
one of them was just kind of like, but it was related to this, is why I bring it up, because one of the things I said was the best part about being a small-time songwriter or an indie musician is that if you perform badly, nobody cares because nobody cares.
Because no one's listening.
Yeah. So, but
Oh no!
but I
Oh
think
no!
that I think that's what I mean is like it's interesting as artists, as songwriters, we write these songs and they feel absolutely terrifying to us, and then we realize we're just like a drop in the pond. It's like it makes a difference. The waves happen and it connects with somebody. Somebody hears it and
Yes,
knows what
absolutely.
you're talking about. But
and I know
mostly,
you're listening.
yeah.
There are people out there who are gonna listen and give you the time of day. And sometimes you get those like shows where you're in a listening room or it's a concert setting and people are really tuning in. But even then, I think like then I'm happy that I went so deep. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm always happy I did it in the end.
That's
and
a perfect way. That's a perfect way to say it. It's empowering on both ends. It's empowering that you can just have the freedom to do it because you don't have to stress so much about what people will think. But also when they do pay attention, you did the diligence to get them the real message. I think that's
absolutely
a really cool thing. So you're also a writer of novels, and you write novels. How many books have you written now?
I have written 6 complete full draft novels.
That is insane.
Thank you. And I only started like really, I always wanted to do this, but I could never get past like page 100 in my manuscripts. I just gave up because I was a beginner and I didn't really know how to get better at it until I read some books that were sort of in the genre that really inspired me, where I thought, oh, I'm not writing literary novels, I'm writing commercial fiction, and like, oh, well, I'm just need to read stuff the way I want to write stuff and just start listening to literary podcasts or writing podcasts and take a couple classes. And in like April of 2019, coincidentally, I had done a lot of therapy leading up to that. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to write my book. So I wrote a fiction YA novel. And then quickly realized I wrote the first draft very fast and then realized it was going to take a long time of editing, and they call it your training grounds novel is your first novel where you are like, oh wait, this is how you write, like after you've written the first draft. So I probably did 30 plus drafts of that book, with submitting it to critique partners and getting feedback back and hiring an editor, with the little money I had to read the first 10 pages and let me know what they thought. And I really learned a lot. There's a lot of free information out there, just like songwriting, where you can listen to a lot of podcasts like this one, get inspired. And then I worked on that book for about a year before I went out to agents, and I did not get an agent for that book because I didn't know at the time that if you write a book for teenagers that's technically considered historical fiction because it took place in the 90s, it's a very hard
really
sell.
Strange. Yeah,
that's really not make you feel old. It's like,
a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, and the criteria is different for adult novels. For adult novels, it has to be far enough in the past that it's outside of the lifespan of most adults reading the book. But for teenagers, that actually fits that criteria because they weren't even born in the 90s now. So it's like, okay, that's historical fiction.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
And for a debut writer or debut author like me who never had anything published, it can be very, very, very challenging to get an agent. It can take years. And it's just a process where agents are getting something like, on average, maybe 400 new queries in their inbox per month.
Wow.
And they have to say no to basically everything because even if they request to read the full manuscript, I've had a lot of requests over the years, which has been very encouraging and very great.
That's good.
But to offer representation, it has to be more than just a great book. It has to be more than just excellently written, in fact, and not saying that I'm necessarily excellent, but it has to be more than a 5-star book on paper. They also have to have this heart connection with it and be willing to commit to reading it many, many, many times and helping you edit it. And they don't get paid until you get paid. So,
I see.
And they can only sign maybe 4 4 new authors a year tops. That would actually be a lot, I think.
Yeah.
So out of like the thousands of people saying, "Hey, do you want to represent me?" They can
Yeah,
only take
it
on so
sounds a
many.
lot
So
like the music industry. So
yes, yeah, it's very
it's very
similar.
interesting. It's very interesting how you sort of jumped from one heartbreak industry to the next one.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's funny though. I feel like I have a little more control over um the author path to sort
Hmm.
of like professional publication, because with music there's so much that goes into it, as
Yeah.
far as like you're really selling yourself
Yeah,
and
there's
your
an image
presence,
quality
and
to it. Yeah.
you've got the face, and
Yeah.
it's like, and I'm getting older, it's like how fresh are you, like,
Yeah.
and like, do you appear? But when you're an author, you can be as anonymous as you want to be.
Right.
And there are people who publish their debut author when they're in their 80s, and
Yeah.
there's far fewer people who get discovered as a
Yeah,
musician as
that's
they
what.
get older. So
Right, right,
it
right.
just kind
That's
of
why
takes
the
the
back of the
pressure
novel.
off.
Yeah, that's why the back of the novel always has like a black and white daisy or something, and it's
Yeah,
somebody that lives in a
yeah.
cabin somewhere in Montana. And
Right, if they want to be anonymous, they can be, but
yeah,
very very few musicians can pull off being anonymous, because there's sort of like a like forward
yeah.
facing
There, you don't.
element.
Yeah, it's almost. It's there's just really no choice nowadays. Pretty much, it's like
Yeah.
you can't be mysterious anymore as much as you would
Not,
like.
I mean, someone could probably get away with it, but I
Yeah.
probably can't. And like,
Right. Right.
and I feel like with writing too, there's
Your
something.
personality's so big anyway. You don't want to
Oh,
be
thank
keeping that
you.
in the inside.
Oh yeah, yeah. I could see myself really enjoying including music with my author presence if I am able to get a book published in the future.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of songs that sort of inspire the books. Two of the books have characters who are musicians and are songwriters, and I've written songs from their perspective
Oh,
that
cool.
are described in the book. It's so fun.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was going to ask you is how
yeah,
does your author brain connect with your songwriter brain, and how does it benefit or maybe not
oh,
benefit?
deeply connected. I would say it's all been beneficial so far, because
Okay.
I think that when I dig into the themes of things I want to sing about and write about, oftentimes that sort of inspires like what is the message I really wish I had when I was a teen, if I'm going to be writing books for teen, that just was not represented in characters I saw on TV, that I can give that to the world
Yeah.
now maybe.
Yeah.
So it's like, what did I need to hear? A lot of my novels
Yeah.
really come down to, where do I belong? I think every author and every songwriter is trying to crack the same nut. I think that's what
Yeah.
you're hitting on
Yeah.
earlier, when it's like, what's the message? I think the question that I'm always trying to answer is, do I belong? Who do I belong with? Where do I belong? Why don't I belong? And it
Right.
all comes down to belonging.
Yeah.
And I think writing fiction, which is very, for me, writing novels has been very long form. And like you get like 350 pages, to tell this
Right.
long story, but it's really very similar to writing an album, and
Hmm.
each chapter is like its own song. And
Yeah.
what's the emotion I'm drawing out? What are, how can I evoke this? Because in music, you don't have time to explain anything.
It's
All you have
true.
time to
Yeah.
do is evoke.
Yeah.
So it's really helped me be a stronger fiction writer, because I'm not just trying to like tell you how to feel. I'm trying
Right.
to evoke that
I love that. So
emotion.
you're kind of you're exploring your inner world through characters that you create and stuff like that. It's
Absolutely. And
right.
trying to almost rewrite the past, or do a little bit of wish fulfillment too, of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what would be
Yeah.
fun? What
Yeah.
did I not get to experience
Right.
in this life that I really want to just have fun and experience? So there is an element of like a little bit of escapism.
Yeah. That's great.
One of my books in particular, the one that is like the most recent polished draft, because I do want to clarify, even though I've written 6 complete full draft novels, 2 of them are only in like that first draft state of
That's
like,
still
okay, I'm probably
awesome.
never going to sell this.
Well,
Let's put it
that's you're
aside for
probably gonna
now,
be yeah.
and like come back to it when
Sure.
it's more efficient to just be self-indulgent and write
Yeah.
something for me.
Yeah.
But for 3 of them, truly, I did the full year of polishing
Hmm.
and trying to go out to agents, and like for various reasons, um, like I've gotten so close, like,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
I'm not
that's
there
like
yet.
that's any creative industry, you get so close, I
Yeah.
just I think it kind of touches on something that I think is would be relevant to like what the podcast is about is we get so caught up in sometimes we get really caught up in the personal part of the songwriting, and we tend to
Mm.
forget that we can still find the truth if we're just exploring characters and
Oh,
protagonists and all that.
absolutely.
And I think there's a misconception that if you don't write just about your own experience, you're not being truthful or genuine or something. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, that's a really good concept. I think about that all the time because I think when I was so before I got my music ed degree, I got a degree in English when I was right out of high school, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
doing some creative writing courses and really feeling like they were each very different. Like sometimes like they were really supportive, amazing communities, and sometimes they were a little more cutthroat and like I
Mm-hmm.
even had someone just like fully be extremely rude to me in one of them.
Right.
But
Wow.
like I'm sure you understand,
Yeah.
like when you go into a songwriting circle or any
Yeah.
kind of like collaborative songwriting environment, or even when you're the teacher, you
Yeah.
notice different groups have different vibes. And
Yes.
but anyway,
You're right
I
about
think
the
I'm
different groups and
losing.
different vibes.
Yeah, I think I'm losing track a little bit. But as far as like what they taught me and what I kept hearing was when you write something, even if it's autobiographical, there is always going to be a slant of fiction to it because our memories make up stories for us, and
Right.
we only have our own perspective. So I really took that and rolled with that with my songwriting at the time, even as an early songwriter in my 19, 20, 21, and just saying like, yes, this isn't exactly how it happened, or that's okay, but this is the emotion that's tumbling out of me, and these are
Yeah.
the words that will evoke this feeling. So for me, it was more about being true to the experience and not necessarily true to the facts, if
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the gem. I mean, that's really the thing is like you said this perfectly earlier. It's
Oh,
songwriting is evoking. You have to evoke a response, and I think that yeah, you could write a song about like everything that you did exactly how it was done, but it's gonna be pretty boring song.
right,
It's gonna be I mean, what is it really gonna be? I woke up, I got out of bed, I put my shoes on, I
right.
walked down the steps.
And
You
I
know what I
think
mean?
people, when they write their first songs, I don't know if you've noticed this with beginner songwriters, I feel like they always want to show everybody's perspective on the issue. And I'm
Yes.
like, I'm like, you don't have to be fair to anybody else.
Yeah,
Just be
there's a
fair
he
to this
said and they
one
said and
perspective. Yeah,
yeah,
and then it gets too convoluted. I'm like, that's
yeah,
another song. Give that character a voice in a different song. In this song, just stick to
right,
this one mindset. Like
right, yeah,
just grab onto it and don't let go.
yeah. And I try to
Like
tell
it's
people,
okay.
yeah, I try to tell people
You
too.
know?
Like, my one of my professors, he told me, songwriters are the best liars.
Oh
I thought,
yeah.
and I was like, yeah, that's what we do. We lie. We lie because we're trying to get to the truthful part, but the truthful part is an emotional part. It's not a scientific part. So you just don't.
Oh
It's not
yes.
mathematical. So we're trying to use very hyper fixated language so that we can kind of express the feeling that we're trying to say. I always tell people, Bruce Springsteen never worked in a fucking factory, man. Like, it's like,
Oh.
but people love it because he understands the experience because he got to the
Yeah.
emotional part of it. Time for an ad break. I'm going to be doing these from now on, so I hope you get used to it. I'll keep it pretty short. I want to talk to you about Firehouse Art Center, which is a nonprofit art center committed to exhibiting thought-provoking art created by local, regional, and national artists. I'm just reading from their website. Through their no fee admission gallery and outreach art classes. This is where I come in. I'm a new Firehouse Art Center member, and I focus on singer-songwriters. So one of the things that I teach out of the FAC is Songwriter Breakthrough, which is my seminar for small-time songwriters, for performing songwriters. We go over topics from stage presence to, the micro music business tips here, practical tips that I've learned along the way, touring and performing all over the place. Also, we go over, of course, songwriting, and we go over tech skills like running your live soundboard and learning how to do live mixing in an effective way that helps your art, that shares your message. And that's the most important thing. I never try to focus on here's a quick scheme to get rich or a way to make your hobby or your art a career. I focus on how can we be the most effective with the tools that we have in the stage that we're at. So all levels are welcome, from pro to amateur to hobbyist. But I will say my seminars are taken pretty seriously. It's almost on a collegiate kind of advanced learning system. So you want to make sure that if you're joining the seminar, it's because you're really into it and you're really trying to make a real hard go at this. Okay, so let's get back to the show. Yeah. So so we were talking about how we're excellent liars, and
yes, I'm glad you returned to that, because as you were talking, I was going to say, I really love this contradiction of having to tell the truth through a well-crafted, beautiful lie.
Yeah.
And also this idea of something that can be deeply personal, but it's only good if it's completely universal.
Right.
So it's like,
that's true.
we're looking for these specific details that are so specific that they're universal.
I love that. Let's explore that. Yeah. Tell me more.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's like this idea of like, it's so true that the only way to describe it is through a fictional way to say it. And then it's like, it can be so personal that the only way to describe it is through making it universal.
Right.
So I think those are the really successful songs when, you know, like for me, in my mind, I'm singing about my daughters and what I hope for them and what I want for them. And then for everyone in the audience, we are clapping, and they're thinking about the people in their lives that they want to lift up.
That's
and
right.
it's like we're all having this experience where it's like, you feel that way, I feel that way too. And but they're not thinking about my kids, they don't even know me. So it's really interesting how
exactly. And
how
I think
it takes a lie to get to the truth.
Yeah, it's also interesting that don't you find it also interesting that like you can make the mistake of making a song too vague also, which is like, it's interesting. It's like if you go too vague with your song, and it's I think this is just my personal belief, but like I think there's like a myth in this sort of like, oh, I'm avant-garde mysterious guy, so I'm never gonna tell you what the ending is. I'm gonna Christopher Nolan the song every time, you know. And I think that
make you guess.
yeah, and I think that's appropriate in the terms of every piece of art is a guideline, and sometimes you break the rules and things like that. But most of the time, red paint is red paint, and you're going to use red paint. And I think it's interesting how often we as songwriters and creators of songs, we hide behind these little things. We do these little I try to keep it vague because I want to keep it vague for the mystery. It's like, is that why, or is it because you don't want to get to the real thing that you're trying to say?
Absolutely. I had a conversation with a student about something quite like this, because I think this student really didn't want to tell their audience what the story was or what to think. And I said, that's all completely fine, but I think that if you know what it means, that will make all the difference. So and that student's story aside, just for everyone as a generality, I think that like, if you're singing something and yes, the lyrics are vague, I think it can really work if the songwriter still has like a really specific intention behind those lyrics. However, if they're just like writing stuff that comes to them that sounds good, there's a little bit of that disingenuous like, isn't this so vague? That's going to like sort of subliminally reach the audience member. So
and you can always feel it too. You can always feel it. I think
so.
Especially when you're in a class. If you're like in a meetup or a class and someone says, what's this line about? And you don't have an answer for it, it's probably because you were just picking the vowels that sounded good with your voice, you know?
Yeah, and I personally like really strongly prefer it when someone has a reason for that word, even if they're the only ones who understand it.
Right, yeah.
It's
we were just talking about that, about how like the artist has we have like these things that only we care about or we think about.
Before the interview started.
Before the interview, I was saying how
but I think it's the intention behind it that comes through. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. No, you're the guest. You talk. You do the talk.
No. Like, so but you were saying how you chose sort of like a specific sound for your album.
Yes. So when I did
why you did it.
So when I did Fabula, I specifically made it sound immature and like adolescent. I made the recording not sound so like produced and mastered, and I made sure I used the guitar that sounded most I don't know what the word is, tangy. Just like
Yeah,
something that
that makes
just
sense to
doesn't,
me.
yeah, just something that didn't sound as full bodied as, like, say, one of my more expensive guitars. And I did it on purpose because I felt like it was part of the story to share songs in that sort of, uh, with that palette, and I,
I love
and,
that so much.
and I think that's cool. Like, I think that's, something that, as songwriters, we have to remember that we're creating art, and art comes from wanting the audience to experience it, but also we need to get an experience out of it as well. and
Absolutely.
and those kinds of things matter. It's the same thing with you. And you were talking on Warning about how you were yelling and stuff like that. Like,
Yes.
that is an example of, like, did the yelling have to be in there, Deborah? Like, no, it was
Ah!
like, Deborah's like, yeah, it had to be in there, but did anybody else could be like, maybe we put trumpets or something, you know what I mean? So
Exactly. It's because of these choices we make and the intention behind the choices. Because it sounds like, especially with your example, you were trying to evoke a specific palette, you said, like an
yeah,
auditory palette of what you would consider immature, or what other people might even consider more like authentic or raw, or less produced, stripped
right,
down. And it's all sort of like, even if we're playing for listeners who might not think that deeply about what they're listening to, it comes through subliminally. And I think it's
yeah,
the intention people respond to, and that like willingness to care so much. So we're not just like slapping it together, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
coming from a place of from the heart. So
Yeah, I think we all have to
yeah.
remember that, because we have this, this kind of gets to our social media question of the day, but
Oh, sure.
we have this thing that goes on in this industry of ours where we just have to stop being innovators, and we have to just focus in on whatever everybody else is doing. And that's the way to
Mm.
get the attention. You get the eyes
Oh,
on you if you kind of follow the same thread and the same path as everybody else, because it's already paved and it's familiar, and the audience knows it, and the audience recognizes it, and a lot of the audience experiences music through that method. So
mhm.
I wonder, with you, as you explore this kind of thing where you're feeling intentional, you're feeling like an artist, you're doing that, how do you balance that with, say, the social media life, and trying to keep up with that part of your career? Because it's one of those things where, like, I go back and forth. I sometimes hate social media and just want to stay away from it, but
Yeah.
mostly I enjoy it because I've gotten to a place where I do it in the way that I want to, um,
Yeah.
so do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what are the obstacles and things like
Oh,
that?
that's such a good question. It's so relevant to today's. I feel like I'm not that like knowledgeable about social media, but I make an attempt, especially if we have a big show coming up or an album release. I'm gonna use that as part of my toolbox where,
Mhm.
yes, I'm going to send the email like to my tried and true email list of all the
Yep.
students I've ever taught. And it's like, if you don't want to receive this email, you can let me know. But
Yeah.
if you're listening to this podcast, you
Yeah.
probably wanted the email. So
Yeah. I
anyway,
think on my mailing list, I said, at the bottom of my my newsletter, I usually put something like, "Are we breaking up? Do we
yeah,
need
are
a
we
break?
breaking up?
Do you need a break?"
Unsubscribe?
Yeah.
I honestly, I send so little communication that I'll be like, oh, we have a show this Thursday. Like, oh, it's already Monday. Should I send an email? Nah, I'm not gonna bother. It's like,
Yeah.
I'll just save it for the big ones.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Sure.
I think I'll use Facebook and Instagram to like sort of make announcements, or I like to sometimes feature something cool we're doing in the recording studio. And then if people see it, that's great. If they don't, that's okay too. I can also, for the when Warning came out, I sent many just individual text messages to people, and using it as an excuse to say like, hey, how are you, like,
Yeah.
and say, and here's the copy paste portion of why
Yeah.
I'm reaching out,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're interested. I'm reaching out to many people who've supported me over the last 20 years or more, who
Hmm.
want to know about my music. And
Yeah.
I think there's part of me that feels shy, like I don't want to bug people. But
How do you get
yeah.
what kind of advice do you give to someone that's struggling with that? Because we have mutual friends and all that, and
Hmm.
some of the songwriters that I talk to, they talk about, like, this uphill struggle of getting one fan at a time and building up the mailing list and all that, and they understand the concept of, you build this relationship, you send out that email, you try to be honest when you say, how are you? And you try to be honest when you say, this is the copy paste portion of the text message today.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I always say. I always say, like, just letting you know, this is something I'm sending out to everybody, but also, how are you doing?
Yes.
But so they understand that that's like probably the right framing for everything, but they don't know how to get from that crevice from A to B. You know what I mean? That one that says, like, no fans, mailing list, send to 20 people or whatever. What do you say to that? How do you get that? How do you get by that little canyon?
That's honestly really hard. I think when someone's first starting out, you've got to put in the legwork to go to the open mic nights and meet people who are also writing songs, and do those shows where you are walking up to people during your intermission and introducing yourself and doing the shaking hands. I mean, I think that, but once you're an established songwriter, it can feel like, oh my gosh, like, have I not graduated from the first tier
excellent
yet?
point. Yes, I have these conversations with so many of my friends, and they all have that same reaction, like, how have I not figured this out yet? Like, you're being left behind.
And it's hard. I feel like people forget about you too. If, like, oh, I used to see that person at my shows and now haven't seen them for a while, I feel kind of bad reaching out just to tell them about a show when I don't have time in my personal life to go grab a coffee. So it's like, it's like you don't want to feel disingenuous. So I think that, like, for me, I'm a little spoiled because as a teacher, a lot of my students are very interested in what I do. So if they show an interest in, like, oh, you play in a band, because we talk about singing and songwriting and performing, and they know that this is part of my life. So oftentimes my students sort of have a natural interest in what I do, and it's so gratifying to play for students because I get to kind of showcase, like, this is what I've been telling you to do. I have a funny story about that, actually.
Sure, tell me.
So I always tell my students, like, no matter what, you don't stop in the middle of your song. You never ever stop. Like, if you're performing, you commit to it. And I also say, try not to apologize. Try not to make, show up and say, I'm sorry, I've had a cold. Like, don't worry about it. Just do your best, and don't put it in the audience's mind that there's any reason why you're not giving the best performance. So it was hilarious. I did a show. It was a really fun backyard concert series with my band. And we had everybody show up. The host invited so many people, and people were so generous in their donations. And that's how the artists get paid for this kind of thing. And it was,
of course,
it was just such a beautiful experience because people are really listening. They've brought their picnic blankets and their chairs, and they're listening to every word, and those are the most rewarding shows. So I had a student come, and I was so excited that my student was there too, and a couple of my friends who made the long drive up from Highlands Ranch to Denver. I'm so grateful because it's always more fun to play for people who really know you. But I literally swallowed a bug as I was singing. There were these mosquitoes swarming me, and I was like, just keep playing, don't swat them away. And as I took a deep inhale, a bug flew, like a tiny little gnat, flew straight into my mouth, and I aspirated on the bug. I felt it, like, tickle my my epiglottis, which is the very back of your tongue, and I knew that it had probably gone into my trachea, which is
so you're definitely a voice teacher, is what you're trying to tell me right now. That's
Yes, I'm big on anatomy. I'm big on the science of the voice. So as I'm singing, I went like, I'm like, did one of those sounds where it's like, oh my God. And, like, I had to just keep singing, and there was this silent spot in my voice. So this is so gross. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's a gross story.
It's great.
But I was like, oh my God, this bug is probably, like, on my vocal fold.
That's funny.
It's like, but I sang the best I could. And then I wasn't even going to say anything about it. But the two women in the front row, one of which is the girlfriend of our drummer, who's a trained singer and a professional singer, she just said, like, I know you swallowed that bug. But she was like, you kept singing. She was like clapping for me. And then I kind of had to tell the audience, like, excuse me. And there's like, And the cool thing was that I kept singing. We were only at, like, the third song in the set too. I kept singing. There was something weird in my voice. It was not quite right. But I did my best. and I didn't let it ruin my fun and my opportunity. I wasn't like, I'm sorry, I have to stop. Like, no, I was like, I'm going to be a little scraggly. I just coughed really hard on my instrument. Like something feels kind of not right. And then at the end, I was able to tell my student, like, see, like, I was totally embarrassed. I literally swallowed a bug in front of everyone. And like, I didn't have my voice be 100% after that. Like it felt like I was working with like a 75% act, like, but I've sung along enough that I can sing over those kind of troubles.
You can accommodate, right?
Yeah, it can be a little scraggly, but I'm hitting the notes. I'm leaning on my band members to sing harmonies with me. And the best part though was I could tell my student, like, I didn't stop. And he was like, oh my God. Like, he's like, I didn't even realize it was that big a deal. He was like, you were acting like it was no big deal. I'm like, no, this was a huge deal. I'm so embarrassed. Like, this is so gross.
So good.
But I think it's so fun.
So is that constitute?
Topic now.
No, that's great. I wanted to ask you this anyway. Is it? I'm always fascinated with people's best and worst gigs anyway. So
yeah, we were going to talk about that.
Is that one of the worst, or do you have one that's worst, or do you have
that was a challenge? That was probably like that was a big.
Okay, real quick, best
challenge.
Real quick, best gig, worst gig, go.
Oh my God. So I've had so many good ones.
Yeah.
One comes to mind where there used to be this wine bar in downtown Littleton, and unfortunately it's closed now. But when they were open, it was called Legacy Vineyards. And Carrie and I, it was when we were performing as a duo in between finding Chedzilla as our drummer and after our first drummer had moved away. We just kind of got in with them. I just walked in there one day and was like, hey, you know, I think actually my friend had gone there for a glass of wine, and she said, oh, do you ever have live music? And she was like, I'm going to tell my friend to call you. And she gave me their card, and they were just so laid back. And we started going there like once a month, like the last Friday of the month. And we ended up getting like a bit of a fan base, which kind of relates to what we were just talking about, of people who were coming back to see us. And that had really never happened to me before. I'd never played anywhere consistently enough to get those consistent people who didn't know me personally coming back. And it was just a fun venue because it was small, so it was easy to fill the house. And there was one night in particular, the last night we played there before they let me know they were closing down. And I think it was Carrie's birthday, and we were just making friends with everybody. We were telling fun stories behind our songs, and people were dancing and like seriously like stomping when we played a song by the Lumineers, and it just had the right vibe. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of stories that sort of end that way, where it just felt like a big old party.
That's cool. Yeah.
But those were some of the best ones for sure.
Well, I don't want to top your fly in your throat story, but is there one in particular that you can think of, like, oh my gosh?
You know, honestly, for a while there, I was saying yes to quite a number of children's birthday parties.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because, I was already doing like shows at daycares, or like coming into the preschool and being like the music lady. Yeah. I love doing that. But once in a while, you get booked for a birthday party where usually it's lovely. Usually the parents are all about making sure like the kids are listening, or that I'm comfortable. But I was doing a show once where like, it was just uncomfortable, where like I could tell like none of the parents were listening. They were all talking super loudly, and I didn't have amplification. And I think the kids were kind of like just really rambunctious. They didn't really know what to do with them. I knew I didn't really have their attention, and they were like just being really rough on the instruments I brought. And I just left there thinking like, ooh, like this was not worth the money, unfortunately. Like it was, because I had to sing so loudly. I sort of strained my voice a little bit. I was like, I really need to like know the parents before I say yes.
Yeah.
So
this is good. This is a good segue to the next thing. So what is a lesson that you would give to the next small time songwriter, or like somebody that, you know, the people that do listen to this podcast, not very many people, but enough. The people that do listen, the feedback that I get is they're on these particular like two stages of their career. They're the ones that are either not established and working their way through it for the first time, or they are established but they're working through how to connect with an audience for the first time. So they're talented, they have the songs written, they have the albums written, and they're performing, but they're just not getting that last little bit, that little click, you know. So I think one of the things that both those people can benefit from is hearing from people that are a little more established and intentional. What I love about you and your music is that you're,
thank you.
And also about the way you approach your art is you're very intentional. You're very like, I can really vibe with that because I'm a very intentional artist myself. So you're very intentional, not just on the artistic end, but like on the business end, on the, like, I have my kids, I have my family, I have my work. I'm going to do this kind of gig when I want to do this kind of gig, and it's going to be this kind of system. I'm going to play the free entry gigs when I want to, and I'm going to sell the ticket like once or twice a year when I want to.
Exactly right, because it's too stressful to
exactly.
do more
You
than
like
that for
understand
me
you understand the balance of it. So what is it, if you could think on your illustrious career, what is
you're
a
so
lesson?
sweet.
What is a lesson?
I would say the very first thing that I would say that I actually need to hear myself is anything you're doing is better than nothing. So
Beautiful.
I could have made the choice, when I had my kids, I got super busy. I'm fortunate to be a music teacher, so I don't have to gig for an income. My drummer has said, like, well, any gig is fine when you're just trying to not be a janitor. If you don't want to be, it's perfectly fine. If you like the day job that's being a janitor, and you want to gig.
Yeah.
But
totally.
he's like, what he was saying is, I'm not qualified to do anything but this, so I will take. There was a time in his life when he had to say yes to any gig. So if you're fortunate,
I'm like that too.
If you're fortunate to be busy enough that you can be choosy about the gigs, and maybe your life is such that like you're doing it as a hobby or a side project, and you're so busy, you're so burnt out, just doing absolutely anything that fits your life is better than putting it completely aside and forgetting about it for 10 years. Like it goes by so fast. So I could beat myself up and say, you know what, this is really hard. I'm still struggling to sell 50 tickets to any given show. I have to work so hard, and I've been at this for 20 years. Like I wish I were further ahead, but the truth is that it's never going to be the center of my life. My children are the center of my life, and fortunately, I'm able to do a lot of creative projects that sort of mesh with being, a very present parent. Sure. But I get to teach and feel creative. But had I decided, like, I'm just going to put my guitar in the closet for a couple years, it's so much harder to get back into it than to just keep going and doing baby steps. And the baby steps add up. Like in the 10 years since I've had my first daughter, that's when I was able to make these connections and help build this band and write these songs. We wouldn't have any of these songs. And like we were able to produce 3 studio, or almost 3, and it's 2.5 because we're not done with the third. Right. Soon I will be able to say that we produced 3 full-length studio albums just by taking baby steps, just 1 hour here, 2 hours there. And that's really like something I can be proud of. So if people are at home and they're thinking like, don't focus on what you haven't done, give yourself props for what you have done. And like, even if, like, I tell my students this all the time, because I get to work with students who like who like, my favorite student is the kind of student who's always wanted to become a singer or a guitar player, and they waited their whole life to get to it. So I work with a lot of retired adults who can come see me in the daytime. I love working with them because I'm like, good for you, because it would have been so easy to just never do it. So I don't know if that's inspiring for the listeners.
No, I think that's great advice. I think that's great advice.
Going.
And any little thing is better than the nothing,
I tell my students,
sorry, go ahead.
Last metaphor is, I love this metaphor that I came up with one day, and it's that my students talk about how, like, I don't have time to practice. And I just say, get that guitar in your hands and just play one song and put it away. And if you can't, and you'll be surprised, you may make time for 2 or 3 songs because you're having fun. But I say, don't just put it away, because like, if you had to paint a whole room, but you only had 5 minutes a day to work on it, and like get out, like keep the wet paint in a plastic bag so it's ready to go. Like keep primed, but like take out that brush and make one little brush stroke every day. And like, you will find that room is going to get painted eventually. But
Yeah.
if you just say, I don't have time to paint today, I don't have time to paint, I don't have time to paint, that room will never get painted.
Yeah.
So I like visual
I like that.
metaphors.
That's great. That's a great metaphor.
So I say, give me 5 minutes, just give me one brush stroke, and I promise you'll get closer to your goals.
Something that I've learned doing this podcast for a while, interviewing my friends and all that, is when I first started, I was just trying to figure out like what I was wanting to do after taking a break from being a songwriter, performer kind of person. And the thing that I always hear whenever I ask this question, like, what is your advice? It always kind of comes down to that. It comes down to that sort of thing of like, you can't let it go. You just have to just kind of do what you can, and however you can do it. And I started coming up with this own conclusion of mine with, if I could tell anybody from all my experiences and talking to my friends with all their experiences, I would say like the thing is with this choice to do art and to tell your story or to tell a story or give a particular message to an audience. What I've come to is just sort of, it's a lot like mental health in the way of like, you just have to be, you have to keep trying. You have to be accountable for yourself. You have to be truthful with yourself, and you have to just put in the work every day, all the time, little by little, and you don't
even
have
if
to,
it's hard.
and there's no, but the great thing is like, there's no right amount to put in the bucket every day. You just put something in the bucket, it could just be like, right now I'm talking to you, so this counts. And then tomorrow I'll work on my record, and that counts. And
absolutely, yes, talking to your friends about your creative
that counts.
Like pursuits absolutely counts. Because it keeps everything fresh for you. And
I mean, just restringing the guitar counts. Those kinds of things.
It honestly does. And it really does.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's good. I think, because I know the difference when you don't do it, because when you don't do it, you're kind of, everything in life is still happening, but you're just slightly more miserable because you're not able to be the artist that you want,
Absolutely. Because everybody coming here is doing it because they feel like they have that story to tell.
Right. Yes. And like my buddy William Wallace, he just started sobriety recently, or semi-recently, and I resonate with that because I'm a sober guy too. And one of the things he said was, when you finally get sober and you understand what life is like when you're sober, and this is only if you have a problem, right? But when you finally start your life as a sober person, you realize how much life has been on like the hard mode of a video game where everything was just on difficult and you didn't know until you got sober, and you realize like, oh, all of these obstacles, they're pretty easy to get through, they're once you,
really beautiful.
And I
was worried you were going to say almost the opposite. So I'm really glad that that's the case.
Well, I'm sure it's like that at first, but then as you become strengthened by your position, you start to feel things are just the way they are, and they're supposed to be that way. And I feel that way too. Like I feel that about songwriting and being an artist. It's, you end up in the situation where if you stop doing it, the world gets harder,
Yes, everything goes on difficult mode because you're not feeding that inner artist that needs to be creative and speak and be heard and connect.
Well, this was a great conversation. I know you got a class you got to get to.
Yes, I do.
I'm glad I really got to get to know you this time, or at least the artist mode of you. And
thank you.
We will hang out soon. Is there anything you need to plug? I know you don't do social media much, but you should plug your social media and stuff.
Oh yeah, maybe if people want to listen to our music, all our links are available on my website, our website. It's just www.deborahsolo.com, and Deborah is DEBORAH, Solo is SOLO, and from there you can link to us on Instagram, Facebook. You can watch videos on YouTube. We have some fun videos on there, and I even have some descriptions of the books that I've been querying.
Oh, cool!
If you want to read the little like back jacket copy of how I sell it.
That's awesome. That's great. Are you going to be publishing? Are you going to be doing your own publishing on that? You're just going to go like the book baby route or something?
I'm gonna hold out and see if I can get an agent to pursue traditional publishing, which means like one of the big 5 publishers. That's my dream. So I feel like I've got the time.
You
And
got the focus.
every
Yeah.
year that I keep getting these no's, I'm just getting stronger as a writer.
That's
So
good.
it's
Okay.
actually a blessing in disguise, because then it's like, by the time I get that yes and we get the green light, that book will be like
That's
the best
awesome.
book I've ever written.
Okay,
Hopefully.
great.
So I'll just keep working.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask you about the social media thing, because I was thinking like it's interesting how your relationship with it, only because you don't, you have a lot of assets that other people don't have. Like you have,
Oh, thank you.
you have a lot of songs that are well written. You're a good performer. You have your band that's really supportive of you, but you also have like literally a space to work out of. You have all these rehearsal rooms. You have the equipment.
Oh, I'm really lucky. Like, thanks for reminding me.
I think it's great. But
I
I
am
wonder,
lucky.
but it makes me wonder, why have you not leaned into those assets
I think
more
because
when
it drains me. I think it
There you
drains
go.
me to try to get on there, and it drains me to have to focus on like reaching out to strangers and be like, hey, do you like me? Do you like me? But I think, talking to you has inspired me, because I think if I just do 5 minutes a day or one little brush stroke
There
a
you
day,
go. That's
maybe
what I was
I could
getting at.
become a
That's
social
what I was-
media mogul.
Yeah, there
and
you
it
go.
would help me with my author career and music career. So this has inspired me, because
Yeah.
like, maybe I need to, I don't know, maybe I got to pick your brain and see if you teach any classes on social media.
I definitely don't. I'm an idiot with that.
All right, well,
But
I do have a
you do have to go.
student
You do have to
waiting
go.
here, so I gotta get
But yeah, the
going.
one paintbrush at a time. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
All right.
I need to do that myself. Take my own advice.
All right. See you. Have a good one.
Back to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.